Lunch Hour Show. For more information about PhillyCam and WPPM, you can go to our website at phillycam.org. Stay tuned for the People Power Lunch Hour Show. Up next. Hello and welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. On today's show, we are going to talk about labor issues and protections that are available to you, the workers out there, who might be experiencing different issues with your employer when it comes to sick leave, a wage theft, and many other kinds of discriminations. Today, I'm joined in the studio with the great folks from the Mayor's Office of Labor, and later on in the show, we will be talking with Community Legal Services. A 2015 report from the Scheller Center for Social Justice at Temple University Beasley School of Law issued a report on wage theft in Pennsylvania. The report discussed the various types of wage theft, including minimum wage violations, overtime violations, illegal deductions from a worker's paycheck, undercounting of hours, delayed or missed payments. And they estimate that in a given work week in Pennsylvania, 397,673 low-wage Pennsylvania workers experience a minimum wage violation, while 326,647 workers experience an overtime violation, and over 250,000 workers are not paid for off-the-clock work before and after their shift. An estimated 49% of beauty, dry cleaning, and general repair workers and 66% of childcare workers in Pennsylvania are victims of minimum wage violations in a given week. The report also found that 67.8% of cooks, dishwashers, and food preparers and 86% of stock office clerks and couriers are denied overtime pay. Further, the report concluded that stolen wages deprive the state of tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue every year and places law-abiding businesses at a competitive disadvantage. So that's why we're talking about this issue today. So we're going to give you some information about why this issue is important, and if this issue affects you, how you can get help and legal representation to challenge your employers to do the right thing. So again, we are joined by the folks from the Mayor's Office of Labor. Their mission is to advance and uphold worker protection laws through enforcement and outreach with a commitment to promoting economic security and racial justice. In just a second, they're going to tell you a little bit more about what they do. I'm here in the studio with Rich Laser, the Deputy Mayor of Labor. He oversees the Mayor's Office of Labor, which manages negotiations and grievance resolution with the city's internal bargaining units. They do so much more. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. Good evening, everybody.
I'm also joined by Candace Tuning. She's the Outreach and Communications Director. Welcome.
Thank you, Vanessa. Hello, everyone.
And also joined by Amanda Shimko, who is their Director of Compliance.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. We have a lot of information to cover and just a half hour to do so. So can you introduce your office and how long you've been around?
Yeah, definitely. So our office came into play in 2015 when then Mayor Kenny got elected to his first term. There was different functions throughout city government for labor protection laws and different labor issues. So at this point, I then came over from the campaign into the government to be Deputy Mayor for Labor and oversee this office that we pulled in all these different functions for labor protection and put them under this one office. And the main part are folks here that deal with our labor protection laws like sick leave, wage theft, the proper displace, discharge for parking workers, and also new laws that are coming on as Fair Work Week and for domestic workers bill. So we do all that stuff, all that good stuff to make sure we protect workers.
That's great. And for listeners who don't know, what are worker protection laws?
So the laws that we have come through City Council, like I said, wage theft and sick leave are on the books. But these laws are to make sure that we're protecting people's wages, making sure they're being paid properly for the hours that they work and the overtime that they should be deserved. They're working overtime, and also make sure they're getting the benefits like sick leave that they're offered through the city's laws. And we got to make sure that employers are following those rules, and also make sure employees know their rights and know what they have what they're deserved to get through city ordinances.
Great. And about how many laws does your office enforce?
Right now, we are enforcing 3 laws, and we have 2 more coming on soon. So I know Amanda's going to get into that when she turns it over to her.
Yeah, one of the laws that people might not know about, it's still fairly recent, is a 2015 Philadelphia wage theft law, which was kind of controversial at the time. There were many corporations, one I won't name, that lobbied heavily against it. This was actually, considered a pretty substantial victory for low-wage workers when that law passed, and that's the city's wage theft law. There's also a Pennsylvania state wage theft law that doesn't seem to be as robust. Can you talk about those 2 laws and what the differences might be?
Sure. So the city's wage theft law effectively allows the city of Philadelphia to investigate and enforce wage theft. It points to the Pennsylvania minimum wage and collection bill as a way to notify us or tell us what in fact is wage theft. And our law allows us to investigate claims of wage theft from $100 to $10,000 for people who work within the city of Philadelphia. So it creates another a venue for workers in Philadelphia to report wage theft violations, and another office to engage in educating employers on how to be in compliance with wage theft.
Yeah, that's great, and that's important because it's another level of protection for people that work in the city, because you don't have to live in the city, correct? You simply have to work in the city in order to be afforded those protections.
Right.
Given that there's this new law and this opportunity to file complaints and, engage in legal action if necessary, what are some of the most common kinds of wage theft law that you've been seeing?
The ones that we see most frequently are people who give a 2-week notice or quit a job, and they're supposed to have that final paycheck either mailed to them or given to them for the last couple of days that they work after they're deciding to separate from that employer, and they never get that. They never get their last paycheck. Or that last paycheck is short or not, doesn't reflect all the hours that they worked after giving their employer the 2-week notice, or simply quitting, right? Like, you don't have to give a 2-week notice. You can just tell your employer, like, I'm not going to work here anymore, and you're still deserved to be paid for every hour that you work up until that moment that you stop working there. And employers, we find, don't send that last paycheck. That last paycheck is short. And workers in the past, I don't think, did much about it and sort of accepted it and moved on because they had already had a new job. But as we're talking with workers and educating them that no, in fact, you're entitled to every last bit of pay from work that you did for your previous employer, we're seeing a lot of complaints that look like that. We also see a lot of overtime violations, and this comes in a lot of ways. Some lower wage workers that are paid in cash are told they'll get a set amount of money per day. So they're told it's $100 a day. And that might turn into a minimum wage violation because, in fact, they work too many hours to only be paid the $100 per day. Or they work 6 days a week and they're, in fact, hitting 41 hours in that week. That 6th day can't be paid at the same rate as the first 5 days. That 6th day is an overtime day. So we see a lot of violations like that as well. Those are the 2 most popular or the 2 most frequent right now.
So if you're listening out there and you quit your job in a rage and you tell everyone you hate them, you are still entitled to your paycheck, right? Doesn't matter the terms of how you left, if you got fired, or even if it, you give your advance notice and you're nice to everybody. Either way, right? It doesn't matter. You can still get your paycheck. I do think a lot of people sort of give up, especially if they were fired or they left under unfavorable conditions. They might feel like they, can't challenge anything or don't have any rights to that money. But for a lot of people, that last paycheck can be substantial. So, we encourage you to assert your rights if you're not getting paid, and to read more about these protections and let this office know, right? And when it comes to overtime, I think that's like really common, probably in food service and in like events, catering, even maybe like construction, day labor jobs, where you might get stuck on the job. I used to work catering for a really long time, and we would get paid a daily rate. And if people, continue to stay at the event, you're stuck there. You can't leave. Right. So I think especially when you're getting paid off the books, there's a real hesitancy to challenge your employer on what you rightfully deserve. So I just want to switch gears a little bit to talk about the sick leave law, which is related. It's another employer protection. And this was also another law that was, passed with some controversy. Can you talk about what that means and what protections workers are entitled to?
Sure. So most full and part-time workers in the city of Philadelphia are entitled to paid sick time away from work. They earn that sick time at the rate of 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 40 hours that they work. And this is, again, I think it's really important to reiterate, full and part-time. So if you only work 15 hours a week, it might take you a little bit longer to earn your paid time off, but you are still earning it for every single hour that you work within the limits of the city of Philadelphia. And you're allowed to use that time not only for your own illness, but also the illness of a family member. And the law spells out like who exactly those family members are, but definitely immediate family. You're also allowed to use it for not just physical health, but mental health, and mental health of your family members. In addition, the law covers you if you experience domestic violence or sexual assault in any way. So you are allowed to use paid sick time or protected time away from work, even if you haven't earned enough time to be paid. This law protects victims of domestic violence and sexual assault to have their jobs secured while they're treating those experiences that they've had.
Yes, we had to reschedule this show last time because I got sick, and it's important to have that time off to recover, and take the time that you need. I think again, this is super common in the restaurant food industry. They don't allow people to take off work. I've read a lot about Walmart being a big offender of not allowing people to take sick time. What happens if you don't have paid sick time? Can you, maybe you're a new employee, or maybe you're a contract worker, or there's many different circumstances. Can you take unpaid time off?
So the city's law protects unpaid time for victims of domestic violence and victims of sexual assault. And I know that CLS can probably talk a little bit more about FMLA and who's covered it in those ways, but those are not city ordinances, so we'll save it for the other experts to come on and talk about that.
Okay, sounds good. On that note, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with the people working at the Mayor's Office of Labor, and we'll talk more about these resources that they have to offer. You're listening and watching the People Power Lunch Hour Show on PhillyCam Radio and TV on WPPM 106.5 FM. And when we come back later on in the show, we will talk with some employees who are doing great work at Community Legal Services. Right now, we have a great PSA from the Mayor's Office of Labor telling you a little bit more about wage theft. Keep it locked here on WPPM and PhillyCam.
Hi, I'm Deputy Mayor of Labor, Rich Laser. Wage theft is an illegal practice when an employer withholds payments for work.
My PSA.
Philadelphia's wage theft law protects workers no matter how they are paid, even in cash. If you believe you are a victim of wage theft, including not being paid overtime for working more than 40 hours a week, or not being paid the rate you agreed to, you can file a complaint. Contact the Mayor's Office of Labor at 215-686-0802. Retaliation is illegal. Again, the number is 215-686-0802.
All right, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. We're here broadcasting live from Philly Cam Studios in Center City. We are talking about labor issues, and here in the city of Philadelphia, we have some really great legal protections for workers when it comes to wage theft and sick leave. And I'm joined with folks from the Mayor's Office of Labor and Deputy Mayor Richard Leeser. That was your voice that we heard on those PSAs. We know you're a Philly guy, or you're from this area for sure, so we appreciate that.
Yes.
And you just talked about retaliation being illegal. So that will be my next question. These laws prohibit retaliation. What does that mean? What are people kind of afraid of when it comes to retaliation?
So I think what people are afraid of is trying to use sick leave or asking about a paycheck or asking why they weren't paid on time and being fired. That's the biggest concern. But retaliation is actually a little bit more than that. So the laws say that if you engage in a protected activity, that you can't face any adverse employment action. And what that means is the protected activity becomes the things that the law make legal, right? So it's now legal in Philadelphia to inquire about how much money you're making per hour, why your paycheck doesn't seem right, any questions about deductions in your paycheck, like any questions at all about pay are now protected against retaliation. So if you do one of those things and then experience any type of adverse employment action, which could be being fired, that would be the biggest and worst case scenario. But it can also be getting your shifts cut, being switched from the good day at work to the bad day at work, experiencing like losing the good parking spot. Like it can be a lot of things that happen at work that you feel and you recognize are happening because in fact you asked about your paycheck, you asked about sick leave, you took a day off of work. And I think sometimes people don't realize this, is that it's not just asking for the sick leave. It's if you ask for it and get it, and then when you come back, they don't let you work Saturday night anymore at the restaurant because you're someone who uses sick leave. That's retaliation, and that is illegal. And these laws make behavior like that by your employer illegal by increasing the fines against your employer for engaging in activity like that, but also if you're fired, getting you back pay for the time that it took you to find a new job. Like you shouldn't go, it's not your fault that your employer did something illegal. It also can get you your job back if you want it. So it allows the city to step in and say, you fired this person illegally and that's not allowed, and you have to give them their job back with their same standing that they had before they were terminated.
Now, I've been in a situation where people have called out at the very last minute, and then, that sort of upsets employers. I do want to clarify, if you are going to use sick leave and you have sick leave available, you still have to follow the proper procedures and policies that your employer requires, right?
Right. So the law says that you have to call out, you have to give the most notice that you possibly could. That means that if you have a doctor's appointment scheduled 3 months in advance, you should let your employer know 3 months in advance that you have a doctor's appointment. It doesn't mean that if you're driving to work and you get ill on your way to work that you can't use sick leave, because that's the first moment that you knew you were sick.
Sure.
So there is some gray area there about what it means to tell the employer as soon as you know, right. But that's your only responsibility. Your responsibility is to do it as soon as you can.
And to notify the proper people, right? So if your policy says you have to email or text your manager, you have to do all those things. And I always, on the show when we talk about legal stuff, documentation, right? So don't just tell someone, oh, I'm not coming in today. Email it, text it, leave a voicemail, all of the above. So that if you are going to go back, right, and file a complaint or, go back to the issue for whatever reason, you have that documentation that you follow the proper procedure, you notified people, etc.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, because again, I've been to court. I've covered a lot of things as a reporter, and I can't tell you how many people show up with no documentation whatsoever, and we know how that goes. So what should people do when they experience a violation? So if you're listening and you're like, that's me, my employer totally did that to me, what should they do?
Yeah. So I would say file a complaint. Not not everyone listening, though, is going to say to themselves, oh, that's me, that's happening to me, because there is a lot of gray area, right? You wouldn't know just by listening to us right now if your employer's policy is compliant with the law. And you could call our office and find out, right? And we do encourage people to call our office for any reason whatsoever. But the reason why I say to just go ahead and file a complaint is that when you file a complaint, an investigator will then follow up with you. And what tends to happen is that we see a whole lot more going on in a situation. When an investigator follows up with you because you filed a complaint, it means that they're looking into it and they're then collecting more information. So I just encourage everyone, even if maybe we find out that your employer's policy is compliant, that's okay. It's always okay to file a complaint. You can withdraw your complaint at any time. And you would file a complaint by going onto our website, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but you can go onto our website. It's fillable right there, and you can email it to us.
That's great. I think I would also recommend, like, if you have some sort of employee handbook or policy book, look at that too and see what that says.
Yeah, absolutely. An investigator would request something like that from you, or any handwritten notes from your employer. Let's say it's a wage theft complaint and you are being paid cash. Anything handwritten, any schedules. An investigator would walk through any materials that we would need in order to investigate.
And I'll add about like what they ask for and how you were saying it's great to have documentation. All of that stuff is true. They ask for a slew of things that you might not think of would be good information, right? If you are someone who gets a schedule via text message every morning and you don't think, oh, I don't know what hours I work, or I don't actually have a schedule on the wall, there are other things that might actually provide us with the appropriate documentation. So even if you're thinking in your head right now, I don't have anything. I know they're doing something wrong. I know I'm not being paid right, but I don't have the papers. We still encourage you to reach out, because we can help you creatively think about what we would need as evidence, or what we can get from your employer, what your employer is supposed to keep versus what you're supposed to keep. So, and that's why, like, the complaint and actually getting yourself in touch with an investigator who can work with you individually is a good idea, even if you're thinking something might be off.
Yeah, and if it happens one time, it's more than likely to happen again, right? Sure. So even if your complaint's not viable for whatever reason, having that information going forward, if it does happen again, will only empower you, I would imagine. How difficult is this to enforce? There's so many employers here in Philadelphia. There's really big ones like the university systems and the federal government. What are some of the challenges that come with enforcing these laws?
So there's two things that we see that are the most difficult to deal with. One is employers who we just call bad actors, right? They're intentionally doing it. We try to look them up to get information from them. They don't have good phone numbers. Their addresses are all old. They intentionally fly under the radar. Those bad actors are hard, and there's not a lot that can be done there by anybody. But we do our best to find them, to try to levy liens against them. We interact with bad actors for you, so you don't have to interact with them anymore if they were someone who was retaliatory or abusive or made threats or things like that. And that's really difficult. That's like the number one most difficult thing about it. The second thing that we started seeing is that there's employers that aren't bad actors. They're small businesses. They're not used to being HR. They don't understand how to write policies. They might not even track hours as closely as they should, right? They just bake, like they're just bakers. They know how to bake. They opened up a business because they're good at that. It's not what they wake up first thing in the morning thinking, I'm going to be an HR person. So what we started seeing was that they need help getting into compliance. They pay their worker when they find out that they did something wrong. They interact with us. Right. So what we've started with enforcement is figuring out how to help businesses get into compliance. So those are the two things that we deal with mostly.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of people, they don't know the law, right? And they don't know a lot, as you said, about employment law. They don't know about these protections, and they're doing everything. They're HR, they're the boss, they're in the kitchen, and I think in that case you're educating them and helping them prevent future actions.
Yeah, and if businesses have a question or they want to feel if they're in compliance or not, or if the law affects them, they can call us, and we'll also guide them through it as well.
So if you're in the middle of policy revisions, this is the office to call. You don't want to get caught later on. What are some of the success stories, right? Like, I am thrilled that this office exists and that you've helped a lot of people. Can you talk about some of the strides that you've made and just how you've empowered people?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, and this probably isn't the most flashy, but the biggest thing was I started about a year ago, and about 3 months into that, Rich and I started talking about what we really need, what we can do to make this office, make more people know about it, right? Both employers and workers. So, and the outreach department was sort of like the biggest thing that we've done to get us there, right? To get the whole city there. And I think Candace can talk about some of the strides that we've made in that realm.
So I think the outreach, the number one thing was to increase presence for the office for both employers and for employees. Just like you said, Vanessa, it's important just for people to know what these laws are, because it really is confidence, right? It's confidence that you know the law if you're an employer, but also confidence that you know the law if you're an employee, to be able to recognize like, oh, hey, that doesn't sound right, or that's a violation. And so a part of increasing our presence was really important. But also like this idea of compliance assistance for these smaller businesses that Amanda outlined. It was clear from what we were seeing in Philadelphia, but also looking to other cities like Seattle and New York, who have like really robust outreach programs, that compliance assistance was a huge part of that. And what that looks like, if you're listening and you are a smaller business, is that we do have policy templates that you can request. We have tracking documents that you can request. We do in-house trainings for your floor managers. We have outreach staff that's focused particularly on business outreach. We have a multilingual outreach program. We can come and speak to your workers if they speak another first language. So we will work and walk through our compliance assistance program for any small business that reaches out, and we do have small businesses that reach out. We are really excited to speak with folks. And Amanda also spoke about bad actors, and I think that is a big challenge, but one thing that we've done for the outreach side is we've started to issue an annual report, which went live today, actually. Yeah. So if you go to our website, you can see our annual report under resources. And we've started to make bad actors public. So, and that just that has gotten a lot of employers to fall into compliance. But we will start issuing public lists of bad actors, and you could also read about it in the newspaper. I know that the Inquirer will be doing stories about the bad actors in our reports. So those are a couple of ways that we've tried to get ahead of this, but I think a lot of it really is battling this this fear of retaliation, futility, that nothing's going to happen if I do report, and making sure that everyone's aware and confident.
Yeah, I think our also big goal is that we want to make sure workers feel comfortable and know that there are protections, and that there is an office in city government that will look out for them and protect them if they're being taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
That's great. I want to thank the three of you for all the work that you do and for coming on the show to provide this information. If our listeners and viewers want to read that report and file a complaint, or if you want to be compliant as a business, can you give them the website information and perhaps a phone number to call?
Absolutely. You can search in a search engine the Mayor's Office of Labor, Philadelphia, and that should bring you to our website. And you can also call 215-686-0802. We also have language assistance, so if English is not your first language or your friend's first language, please encourage them to call anyway.
Thank you so much. That was Candace Tuning. She's the Director of Outreach and Communications at the Mayor's Office for Labor. I also want to thank Richard Laser, the Deputy Mayor of Labor, and Amanda Shimko, the Director of Compliance. Thank you so much for sharing this information with our viewers.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to some employees that work at Community Legal Services. We're going to talk about some of the programs and services that they offer for workers and talk more about these issues. You're listening to and watching the People Power Lunch Hour show on Philly Cam TV and WPPM 106.5 FM. Stay right here. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Deputy Mayor of Labor, Rich Laser. According to the Philadelphia sick leave law, businesses in Philadelphia must notify their employees that they are entitled to sick leave, provide either paid or unpaid sick leave, and keep records of sick leave for 2 years. Contact the Mayor's Office of Labor at 215-686-0802 if you believe you have experienced a violation of this law or to find out if you are covered. Retaliation by employers is illegal. Again, the number is 215-686-0802. Hi, I'm Deputy Mayor of Labor, Rich Laser. Wage theft is an illegal practice when an employer withholds payments for work. Philadelphia's wage theft law protects workers no matter how they are paid, even in cash. If you believe you are a victim of wage theft, including not being paid overtime for working more than 40 hours a week, or not being paid the rate you agreed to, you can file a complaint. Contact the Mayor's Office of Labor at 215-686-0802. Retaliation is illegal. Again, the number is 215-686-0802.
You're listening to the People Power Lunch Hour show on WPPM 106.5 FM and watching live on Philly Cam TV. And hello to all of our Facebook Live viewers out there as well. You just heard from the Mayor's Office of Labor, and we want to thank them for all the work that they're doing on the sick leave law and the wage theft law and all of the other programs and services that they offer to employers. So we are going to switch gears right now. We have some new guests in the studio from Community Legal Services. Their mission is to fight poverty, challenge systems that perpetuate injustice, and change lives through cutting-edge advocacy and exceptional legal representation. They were founded in 1966 by the Philadelphia Bar Association, and they provide free legal assistance to more than 1 million low-income Philadelphians. Approximately 10,000 people were represented by CLS in Philadelphia in the past year. They deal with all types of issues, especially when they help people who are facing the threat of losing their homes, incomes, healthcare, and even their families. CLS attorneys and other staff provide a full range of legal services from individual representation to administrative advocacy to class action litigation, as well as community education and social work. They've been recognized nationally here in Philadelphia as a model legal services program. So we love the folks at CLS. They've been on our show a couple times. And of course, it's a new issue we haven't covered with you. So again, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let me turn those mics on. All right. Yes. Sorry about that. This is a live show. So, we're going to continue our conversation about labor and protections for employers. I'm joined in the studio by Rhiannon DiClemente, and that's the staff attorney in the employment unit, and Laura Rodriguez Ramos, a paralegal and an outreach worker with Community Legal Services, both from the employment unit. Thank you so much for coming in. tell us a little bit more about community legal services and the work that you do in regards to working with workers out there and employers.
You summarized it pretty well, but yeah, in particular with employment, the employment unit handles a different variety of issues, including criminal records. We help people eliminate the records. We help people that have faced discrimination at the workplace, people that have faced issues with their employers when trying to take some leave, FMLA that I think Candace mentioned as well. And also recently we have been trying to expand our services for people who are facing issues with employers who don't pay their wages, or they don't pay them the promised wage, or they are doing illegal deductions from their salaries. So even if we don't handle a specific issue, you are more than welcome to come to our offices so we can at least provide you with advice and guide you through the right source of assistance.
That's great. What are the types of employment cases does CLS handle or see the most often?
So yeah, as I mentioned, each case is different. So we see people coming into our office because they feel they have been wrongfully terminated, or people who want to go on leave for some disability that they are facing at the moment, whether if it's short or long-term disability, and their employers are giving them a hard time or even firing them because of that. People who are undocumented and are facing threats from employers because they claim they are going to call ICE on them if they dare to submit any type of claim because they are not being paid. People who I don't know. I mean, we see many different types of cases. Those are the ones that come to my mind right now. We see people who are discriminated or feel discriminated in some type of way for their sexual orientation, religion. We also provide assistance not only for English-speaking clients. We have interpreters in-house, and even if we don't have interpreters for in a specific type of language, we will provide it for you. And also people with disabilities like deaf people who cannot. We arrange the in-house meeting to after intake hours so that they can come and we can provide the personalized intake for them.
Yeah, I think
that's great.
Just jump in. I think that's all right. And, a lot of what we see are these wage theft cases that the mayor's office was talking about, discrimination cases. And recently, with the passage of the Clean Slate Law in Pennsylvania that CLS was involved with, we've been doing a lot of assistance for folks who have criminal records or child abuse records that are preventing them from getting gainful employment. So helping them, find out if they're eligible for expungement or a pardon. But really what we're looking to do in the coming year is expand our outreach efforts and representation of folks, especially immigrant workers or undocumented folks who have been victims of wage theft or sexual harassment or discrimination in the workplace.
Probably one of the most vulnerable populations here because there's already so much fear of ICE, that's a really big fear right now, especially with the current administration, and fear of losing your income, right? There are a lot of people who want work, and so when people complain, there might be a fear that they're going to lose their job and they're not going to be able to have that income. Who qualifies for community legal services? How can you get help?
Well, our process is that you come into our office, you speak to a paralegal, they gather the information from you. We do have some income eligibility guidelines. However, we encourage people to still come to our offices and don't get discouraged by that because we might make some exceptions, or we have a range of income eligibility limits. So it is important that they still seek assistance because, as I mentioned earlier, even if we can't represent you, we will refer you to another source of assistance. Mm-hmm.
And someone will likely tell you what your rights are, right? And clarify the law and at least put you in the right direction for other resources. I think that's the hardest part. I think many people have been looking online and these legal websites and not really understanding what the law is because it's written in a way that's not for lay people. So community legal services has always been really great and sort of like breaking it down for people and letting them know what exactly it means. So I wanted to talk more about our immigrant community here in Philadelphia, many of whom are undocumented and come here to work, right? There's a lot of job opportunities here in various industries. How do you work with undocumented workers?
The process is the same with them. They go through intake, then we assign the cases to the appropriate unit. Whether if it's not only for employment, they can come and seek assistance for any type of the issues that we handle. But then after that, the case will be assigned to an attorney or a staff member of the unit, whether if it's for representation, advocacy, or just general advice. And if they need assistance with interpretation that we don't have, then we will look for it. And our representation goes, whether if it's to send a demand letter or guide them through the process of filing a complaint with an appropriate government agency, or just taking and in some instances we will take the cases to court. So it really, we evaluate the cases at each stage. So we can provide the best type of representation for each client.
And I think for, especially for immigrant workers, what we're looking to do in the coming years is really go out into the community and partner with community organizations that have ties to immigrant communities here in Philadelphia to do trainings about workers' rights, to do clinics out in the community. So people, if they can't make it into CLS's office, they could perhaps go to a clinic in their community where we would do intake there and see if we can help them with any issues that they're having in the workplace. And really kind of, letting people know, especially undocumented workers, that they are covered, by the Fair Labor Standards Act, by Pennsylvania wage and hour laws, that they do have rights and that retaliation is prohibited. So if they, want to assert their workers' rights, their employer is actually prohibited by law from retaliating against them. And in certain instances, there might be additional avenues for immigration relief for people who have been victims of workplace crimes or labor trafficking that we at CLS may be able to identify and either help them with or refer them to a firm that handles immigration matters that could possibly handle an immigration case for workers.
So for somebody that is undocumented and say their employer refuses to pay for them, they're working under the table, how does that get resolved, right? I don't think a lot of people know that they're entitled to these protections. Do you try to do like a mediation first before it goes to court?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the first things that we want to make people aware, you're right, a lot of the undocumented people that are, of course, not enrolled in payroll or, as we will say, working under the table, they don't know that they have rights. So we want to first, through outreach, make them aware of that. That's why we're trying to expand our services in that area so that they can also spread the word within their community. And also, we want to make them understand that when they come to seek assistance from us, the information that they share with us is confidential. So we are not going to share that information with any other law enforcement agency or any other agency in general without their authorization. We are required to comply by the rules of professional conduct, so anything that they share with us is confidential. So after, as you mentioned, one of the first steps that we will take when we take a case, it will be to try to mediate the situation through a demand letter, that we call it like that in the office, to try to kind of remind the employer about the rules and let them know why they violated those rules and try to recover the wages for our clients.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that, that employers respond to that? They see that letter and they're like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I didn't know that, or how does that usually play out? Do most of the cases go to court, or are many of them resolved?
It's very varied. And it really depends on the situation. I think, before the mayor's office was talking about some small employers that may not be aware of the rules. And in cases like that, sometimes we'll see that the employer will just kind of, try and resolve the case after receiving the demand letter. But there's also a lot of cases, especially when we're dealing with small employers that might not even have the money to pay the wages, and that's kind of where the issue is arising, that won't respond to demand letters, or they'll respond and kind of dispute the factual allegations that we've made. And at that point, then, like Laura was saying, usually our first step would be to kind of investigate the case with the client, write the demand letter, and then after that, we would decide whether it's something that we should refer perhaps to a government agency like the mayor's office of labor, and we would assist the client with either filing a claim there themselves, or we could perhaps file it on their behalf. Or, like Laura said, in certain cases that we think, are factually very strong, we might also take that to court. But it really depends on the situation, and I think it does vary, based on the employer, kind of how they'll respond to that initial demand letter.
And also, when we work with undocumented clients, we also try to do an immigration assessment to realize what the impact of conducting or taking the case any further will be, and of course, like consulting with them before we take any action.
That's really good because, they might not want to continue with it if they know what all the consequences might be or the exposure that might be given to them as well. What services does CLS provide to individuals dealing with wage theft or discrimination in the workplace? Because, there's a lot of different things people might experience when it comes to discrimination. As you mentioned before, there can be racism, there could be sexist, misogynistic, sexual harassment type situations and comments. What resources do people have?
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. So when it comes to discrimination and harassment in the workplace, when someone comes in who feels that they've been discriminated against, we would walk through the facts with them and help them identify whether they're covered by, federal, state, or local law. Title VII applies to employers who have 15 or more employees, but state laws are more broad and cover more workers. So it's very likely that they may be covered. And then we would basically help them identify kind of the resources available to them, whether it's filing a complaint with the Philadelphia, the city, or with the state agency that enforces the anti-discrimination laws, or with the EEOC, which is usually a prerequisite to filing a claim in court. So we would kind of help them know what the law is, help them know if they're covered by the laws, and then kind of the next steps that are available to them, the different agencies, how they work. And then we would make an assessment and decide whether, we would just kind of help them figure out the process, or whether CLS has the resources to file something on their behalf.
Yeah, that's great. I think that a lot of people, again, they just unaware that there's these agencies out there that are going to fight for them and make sure that they know their rights. How can people reach CLS for help with employment issues? Like, what would be the first step if somebody's listening or watching and they say, I've been having this issue with my employer, I'm really stressed out, or I had to leave my job, or I got fired. How do they report this issue? Like, what's the process?
Well, we invite you to visit our website. We have our general intake hours there. We have two offices. One is 1424 Chestnut, that's downtown, and the other one is located in Broad and Erie. That's called the North Philadelphia Law Center. We are open Monday through Friday, and we have in downtown office, we have intakes 5 days a week, so you're welcome to come. We see people on a first come, first serve basis, 9 to 12. Of course, if you arrive a little bit before 12, we're going to make sure we see you. You can also, if you don't have access to get to visit our website, you can call to 215-981-3700. And you can also follow us in social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, and I think our username for all of it is CLS Villa. Mm-hmm. So please visit us, because that's also important when following up the community outreach that we're doing, the workshops, the type of advocacy that we're working on, and even if the office is closed, so it is important that you try to keep yourself informed.
Yeah, and I wanted to know more about these clinics and the community, because I think it's hard for people to come to even Philly Cam, right? We have a lot of people who we have to go to their communities and their neighborhoods to let them know about what we're doing. What's some of the information that's communicated in those clinics, and who can host one? Like, how does that work?
Right. So we're in the process of doing our outreach planning for the year. And so the hope is that we'll be doing kind of almost like a Know Your Rights clinic, partnering with community organizations that have ties to immigrant communities here in Philadelphia. So it essentially would, once we have a partner organization, we would work with them to just do some publicity around our event, hopefully get, a good crowd to come out. And the training would basically cover workplace laws that apply to Philadelphia residents. So it would be local, state, federal laws, what their rights are in the workplace, what resources they have, how CLS could help someone. And then our hope is that we'll actually be doing intake clinics remotely as well. So, if we do a training and we hear a lot of folks saying, I am facing issues with my employer, or if there's a one employer perhaps that, has a couple employees that are facing similar issues, we could do remote intake, hear more about their cases, and take on those cases without someone ever having to come into CLS's Center City or North Philadelphia office. But yeah, the trainings will be hopefully to, a good overview of the employment laws that apply to these workers.
Yeah, so if you're in a community and you know some organizations that work with immigrants that could make this accessible to them, definitely call CLS and let them know and be interested in working with them. That's really important. Again, just, getting out of our offices and into the neighborhoods and the communities where people feel most comfortable. Now, I have a general question, which is, my partner's in the union. A lot of this stuff is covered, through his union representative. So do you deal with mostly people who are not unionized? And what if somebody is in a union but their case is getting nowhere? How does that work?
Yeah, we occasionally have folks come in who have issues in the workplace, but are members of a union. And usually what we would help them do is kind of figure out what the grievance process is through their union, figure out if, they've made the union aware of what's going on, figure out, what steps the union has taken to help them, to see if, if there's anything that we can do to kind of help the union's grievance procedure move along in accordance with the contract. And in certain cases, it would depend on the facts whether, CLS would be able to help someone, because traditionally those types of cases would go through the union under the terms of the union contract. But
Sure.
there are cases where, if that hasn't worked out, that CLS has been able to help in other ways.
Yeah, because there are unions who are accused of racism, right? And if you're a person of color and you're trying to make a claim of racism with the very people that are perpetuating it, that can be a difficult process, or even sexism or sexual harassment, and people at the top are those people. So it's good to know that there's other people out there that can sort of help navigate that process, because some of these unions are just massive, right? And there's thousands and thousands of workers, so trying to kind of like move through that system can be difficult for some people.
And like Laura said, really, we encourage everyone to come in, if you're in a union, if you're not in a union, just to intake if you have an issue. CLS, we're happy to listen and to see if there's anything we can do to help, or, resources that we could provide.
Yeah, and graduate students, I think, are another population that have started to organize themselves and unionize, because many of them teach and do research, and they're also covered, right? They're getting a paycheck from the university, so they're covered by these laws as well.
Right. Yeah. And for workers that are looking to organize too, they're covered by the National Labor Relations Act and protected, when they're engaging in concerted activity to improve their working conditions. So we're always happy to kind of advise people of what their rights are and what the employer is prohibited from doing if you're trying to unionize your workplace, or to talk to other workers about, issues in the workplace.
Yeah, we've also had people coming that were working in a unionized position, but they were in the probationary period, so then they were fired before they were protected by the union, or people who, after filing the grievance or all the process with the union, they didn't feel properly represented by the union, so they want to file a complaint against the union. So we at least want to give them advice and guide them through the process, because we understand that for a lot of people, when going through a difficult situation and stressful, it's not easy for them to understand how every part of the process works, or if they have to meet a deadline or something like that. So we want to at least, even if we wouldn't take the case for resources reasons or for caseload reasons, we want to at least provide you with the assistance for you to seek the appropriate service.
Yeah, and that goes for people that work at a place where there is a HR person and this is their job and maybe they're not getting anywhere with them. It's, again, good to have people give you some sound legal resources so that you can pursue the matter, elsewhere. So again, if you're listening or watching out there and you're a worker, right? You either are on the books or on payroll, you are undocumented or you are documented. If you're a student, if you're all covered, right?
Yeah, right.
You're all entitled to these worker protections. And so that's the most important thing to know, is that there are people here that will advocate for you if you're experiencing any of these things. We're almost at the end of our show. Are there any other resources or things that you would like to tell our viewers and listeners out there about?
I guess we will just like to point out the importance of, for employees to also keep records, especially when they are not being paid or they are being threatened at their job or something. Keep a notebook and write down all how the situation happened and the days that you were not paid or the days when you were paid late, because sometimes even when employers are required to keep records of that, they don't, and then we face difficulties when trying to get evidence, and it is very helpful, especially for them, again, going back to the fact that sometimes they are stressed, they don't understand the law, so writing down for them will be helpful, because when they come to us, even if they don't remember details, they will have a notebook to go back to, and that will also help us a lot to build a case for them.
Absolutely. Documentation. Here's another pro tip. Some people get fired and they don't have access to their employee email anymore. So you can always BCC yourself, blank carbon copy yourself to another email if you are communicating about an employment issue, so that you can access those records even if you can't access your employee email after something happens. Again, just having a record of the communication can be super helpful in your dispute.
Right. And now that you're saying also email, that's also helpful when sometimes, for example, you requested something to your employer and they told you something, but it was verbal. You could always follow up by email and be like, hey, per our conversation, or I just want to summarize our conversation so that you can have a track of what was told to you.
Yeah, that can be really helpful, especially in the initial stages. In court you can get discovery, but when we're writing a demand letter, this stuff can be very helpful in trying to figure out, what happened and what we're asking for. So I think that's really good advice.
Yes, per our conversation yesterday, where you approved my vacation time. I want to thank you for that. Just reiterating what the conversation was about: keeping a logbook, saving any text messages, all of the above. You never know when you might have to utilize that information. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for joining the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I've been speaking with Laura Rodriguez Ramos. She's a paralegal and does outreach at Community Legal Services at the Employment Unit, and Rhiannon Di Clemente, a staff attorney also in the Employment Unit of Community Legal Services. Can you give them the website one more time?
Sure. clsfila.org. Again, clsfila.org. Also, you can follow us again in any social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's the same, CLS Fila. So please join us.
All right. Thank you so much. And we also want to thank the nice people at the Mayor's Office of Labor for all of the work that they do. If you'd like more information about these issues, you can follow PhillyCam on our social media. If you'd like to watch this show and all of our past episodes, you can go to our website at phillycam.org. You could also go to our YouTube page at PhillyCam and check out the People Power Lunch Hour show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.